Lately, a lot of people have been worried that there is no leadership at Daybreak. Let's talk about it. Hello, heroes and villains. Welcome to Multiverse. So recently, we talked a bit that Daybreak are still looking to hire quite a few key people, and especially key people in positions of leadership. They're looking for producers, art directors, creative director, lead designer. So pretty much people at the top of the pyramid who make all the decisions, or whom we might think make all the decisions. Now, is DC Universe Online and also Daybreak without leadership? And the short answer is no. Let's go into the long answer now. No, I do not have any insider knowledge about this. I do not have any insider information. Maps doesn't tell me anything. But I've worked for a lot of studios. I have a pretty good knowledge of what's happening in studios behind the scene. So I'm pretty sure I can fill in some of the blanks. Obviously, what I'm going to say, again, I have no insider knowledge. What I'm going to say is pretty much guesstimation, an educated guess based on all the experience I have working for a whole bunch of studios in the past. Seeing diverse positions that Daybreak are still looking to fill, yeah, it would look like there is no leadership at Daybreak right now, and it would give the illusion that there is no leadership with DC Universe Online right now. Sadly, the true leadership is not really at Daybreak. It is actually with EG7. EG7s are the true leaders. They make the decisions, and then whoever is at Daybreak at the time execute those decisions. So sadly, the true decisions are not being taken by the people at the head of DC Universe Online or the people at the head of Daybreak. The true decisions are taken by the people at EG7. Yes, some decisions will be taken at Daybreak. Some decisions will be taken by the art director. They might decide, okay, let's give Superman a dark blue costume as opposed to the bright blue costume he usually has. But ultimately, the real decisions come from the people at EG7. I guarantee you that the ally system that we got that was added with the House of Legends, that comes straight from EG7. And that is something that feels very much like something you would find in a mobile game, especially the way that we're aggressively monetizing the allies at first, or the new emotes feature that DC Universe Online wants to add. Again, that is something that would come straight out of a mobile game, and that seems to be where EG7's expertise lies. EG7 seems to be more into mobile games than actual games, but they have purchased companies like Daybreak, so now they do have some actual games. So I wouldn't be surprised if, based on the current leadership we have thanks to EG7, we'll see more and more features from mobile game being added to this Universe Online. So odds are EG7 are looking at some of the things they do with their mobile games that seems to be successful, and I guarantee you they're probably scratching their heads wondering how can we add those features to this Universe Online. Like, it's not like the previous leadership wasn't taking ideas from other games. Heck, Jackster used to work on a game called Neverwinter way back when, and then at some point he switched to Daybreak and worked on DC Universe Online. And as soon as Jackster was added to the DC Universe Online team, we saw things like artifacts that were added into the game. And those of us who had played Neverwinter before knew full well that that is where Jackster got the idea from. Although maybe he's the one who came up with the artifact system with Neverwinter, and then decided to add the same thing, or not quite the same thing, but a similar idea to DC Universe Online. But when we saw the artifact system being added to DC Universe Online shortly after Jackster joined the team, it was obvious that he was the one who brought that over from Neverwinter. And speaking of Jackster, it was very surprising that when EG7 purchased Daybreak, that Jackster was still there. Nerd of Prey had already left. We don't really know why Nerd of Prey left, but the fact that she left not long before we got the announcement that EG7 was purchasing Daybreak, it's hard not to think that there's a link in there somewhere. But when EG7 purchased Daybreak, again, it was very surprising to see that Jackster stayed around. Usually when a big entity purchased a smaller one, The first move that is being done is upper management is usually let go. Basically, the new true leadership, in this case CG7, does not really want to have to fight the older leadership whenever they make a decision. So very often, the first thing that is being done is they get rid of the old leadership, they get rid of the upper management, and then afterwards they proceed to getting rid of any redundancies. Basically, they'll get rid of anyone at Daybreak who's doing a job that they already have someone at EG7 that's doing that job. For example, the accounting department. I'm pretty sure EG7 already has their own accounting department, so one of their first thing they probably did was get rid of the Daybreak accounting department. Now they may have taken a few people from the Daybreak accounting department and merged them with the EG7 department, but ultimately at the end of the day, they will remain with only one accounting department, and everyone else will be let go. The same with other departments like the legal department. So the Daybreak legal department would be let go and pretty much replaced by the EG7 department, or taken over by the EG7 department. The same with marketing and probably other departments I failed to mention. Now, the real surprise is not so much that Jackster left Daybreak. Basically, some time ago, Jackster left Daybreak, and he took a whole bunch of devs with him. The real surprise, again, wasn't so much that Jackster did leave Daybreak. The real surprise was that he didn't leave Daybreak as soon as EG7 purchased the company. My guess is that he might have thought that he would still be able to act in a leadership position, despite EG7 being the actual bosses. But also, from what we understand, he seemed to have been the link between Daybreak and Marvel for the new Marvel MMO that Daybreak were working on. So that might be why G7 did not let him go right away. They probably needed him for the Marvel deal, so they kept Jackster around. And Jackster probably stayed thinking that he would still be able to pretty much have the leadership role he always had. But ultimately, things didn't work out, and Jackster left. And when he left, he didn't leave by himself. He left with pretty much all the veterans at DC Universe Online. Well, not all, because we still have a Red 5. But he did leave with a bunch of them. Not to mention those who had already left before Jackster did leave Daybreak. Now you have to wonder, if Jackster truly was the leader at Daybreak, then why would he leave? Odds are he left because he was not the leader at Daybreak. He had to abide by the decisions made by EG7, and for a while probably the decisions from EG7 matched with the decisions Jackster wanted to make. But at some point that probably was no longer true. So once the decisions from EG7 were not at all decisions that Jackster would have made, that probably did cause tension. And if I was to make an educated guess, I would say that that might be why Jackster decided to leave Daybreak. And sadly, very often breakups are very ugly. So when Jackster left, it's obvious that he decided to leave with pretty much everyone who did seem to be loyal to him, as opposed to just leaving himself. Again, no surprises there. I've seen it happen before. Sometimes when someone in the position of leadership leaves, they take people that were loyal to him to a different company, or in this case, they form their new company, and they bring the people who were loyal to him to his new company to get the whole thing started. Heck, we just saw that not too long ago with James Gunn. James Gunn pretty much left Marvel to become the head or the co-head of DC Studios, and he brought with him all the people that were loyal with him. Pretty much all the people from Guardians of the Galaxy will jump ship from Marvel to follow James Gunn to DC and his new adventure. But anyway, to come back to Jackster, odds are if Jackster had been truly leading DC Universe Online and Daybreak, he might still be there. But again, my guesstimation, my educated guess would be that sadly Jackster probably was no longer in charge, and he was able to make it work for a while until he wasn't, and then he left. But anyway you slice it, at the end of the day, the true decisions are being taken by EG7. EG7 are the true leaders behind Daybreak and behind DC Universe Online at this point. And what about in the studio itself, in Daybreak itself? What about DC Universe Online itself? If they don't have any art director, who's doing the art directing? If they don't have a creative director, who's doing the creative directing? There are laws that regulate the universe or even the multiverse. Basically, nature hates a void. Whenever there is a void somewhere, nature will fill it. Something will happen to fill the void. I guarantee you that whatever void is left by the lack of an art director, there is someone at Daybreak who is filling that void. It could be multiple people. It could be more than just one person. Maybe two, three people are filling in various parts of the art director job. Like whoever's in charge of designing the character right now might be filling the void left by the art director by making the decisions for the character designs. Someone who's in charge of maybe making the locations is pretty much doing part of the job of the art director when it comes to the locations. So odds are there are various people that basically step up and fill in for at least part of the art director's job in order to keep the project going. And the same would be true for a creative director. I guarantee you that the odds are once a week, once a month, once in a while, DC Universe Online has meetings with pretty much everyone, brainstorming ideas of, okay, what are we going to do next? Normally, the creative director would be the one who would decide, okay, here's what we're going to do next. But very often, they'll still take feedback from people. Like, they'll have a meeting with everyone, they'll pitch all the ideas, and then they'll make their decisions. Not necessarily based on those ideas, but those ideas might influence the decisions that the creative director might make. Although, there's also the illusions of decisions. Let's say you're in a position of leadership and you decided, okay, we're going to have to repaint the studio, and you decide, okay, we're going to repaint the studio blue. You could add like a dictator and dictate that, okay, guys, tomorrow we are going to paint the studio blue, and that would be the end of it. Or you could decide to have everyone participate in the decision, or at least to give the illusion that everyone is participating in the decision. So you get everyone together, you say, guys, we need a fresh new paint of code for the studio. What do you suggest we should do? And then you have some discussions, and somehow the discussions end with everyone agreeing, we should paint the studio blue. Like, you already had decided to paint the studio blue, but by doing it this way, you manage to make everyone feel included in the decision making process, even though you already had made the decisions before. But here, even though basically the creative director is no longer there, it just means that someone else is making the decision instead. So odds are they probably still have the meeting. They discuss, okay, what color should we paint the studio, and someone else, usually someone who's a veteran, will probably make the decision instead of the creative director, seeing how there's no creative director right now. If I was to make a guesstimation, I would say that Red 5 is probably taking the lead on a lot of things that normally would be decided by the creative director. Just as we saw Meps fill in for the Pandorus, the missing producer, because Pandorus was no longer there. So again, nature hates a void. So Pandorus was no longer there. We usually get a development update once every few months. So nature decided to fill the void. So Meps is the one who actually gave us the development update as opposed to Pandorus. So again, there was a void there. Someone needed to fill the void. And in that case, it seems that Meps is the one who stepped up and gave us the development update as opposed to Pandorus. Now, I make it sound like those positions are not needed. They are needed, but they're not. It's not the end of the world if they're not filled right away. Especially some of the positions like art director or creative director, because odds are whoever they hire as a new producer for DC Universe Online, they will want to have their own team. They will want to have their own art director. They will want to have their own creative director. So let's say you hire a new, creative director, and then you hire a new producer, but the producer doesn't like the current creative director. He would like to have one of his own people in the position of the creative director. One of two things will happen. Either the creative director will be fired to be replaced by the person that the producer wants to have in that position, or the producer will just say, no, if I cannot have my own creative director, I'm not taking this job, and the producer will just not take the job. Yeah, the producer could decide to take the job, thinking that down the line he will get rid of the creative director and he will hire the person he wants to be the creative director at that point. But that's never a good idea. It usually leads to a pretty toxic environment. I've seen that in some projects where people would deliberately sabotage someone's work because they didn't want that person in that position. They wanted one of their friends or their girlfriend or their buddies in that position instead. So when that happens, it's never a good thing. So ideally, they should hire a new producer first and then let that producer hire the creative director, the art director, and the lead designer. That way, the producer will have the team that he wants. He will have people that he trusts in those positions. If he hires those people himself, he might think that those people are loyal to him. As opposed to if the new producer comes by and there's already a producer and a creative director, those might not be loyal to him. Those might be loyal to EG7, let's say. And as a producer, you don't really want that because that would mean that odds are what would happen in the long term. If your team is loyal to EG7 and not to you, they might decide to go over you at some point and go straight to EG7 whenever there's an issue or a problem. Normally, within a big organization, there's something known as the chain of command. And in the chain of command, when there's an issue, you go straight to your supervisor and you deal on that level with that issue. But if you're not loyal to your supervisor, but you're loyal to the person above them, then you may decide to go over your supervisor to go to that person above them. So in this case, let's say you're not loyal to your producer, but you are loyal to EG7 for whatever reasons, then you might be tempted to go over your producer's head and go straight to EG7 when there's an issue. And from the producer's point of view, that is not a good thing. So if you are a producer, you don't want that to happen. So ideally, you will want people that are sort of loyal to you. So you will want to build your own team yourself, as opposed to having EG7 build a team and then hiring you as a producer. So there might be some of that happening right now. Maybe they're waiting, maybe they're trying to hire a producer first, and then they will hire a creative director, and then the creative director will hire an art director. We don't really know for sure, but it would make some kind of sense. So even though we don't have an official creative director right now, we don't have an official art director right now, it doesn't mean that there's no leadership at DC Universal Online or Daybreak right now. It just means that someone else is probably stepping up to fill some of those positions. I'm sure I mentioned this before in a previous video. Basically, when you work for a small organization, which is pretty much what Daybreak is, you have to wear many hats. So in a small organization, usually you don't do just the one job. Yes, you could get hired to be, let's say, a character designer, but you could have to step up a bit and do a bit more than that. You could have to sometimes maybe design a few props, maybe help a bit on the location design, or in this case, maybe you have to step up a bit and help with the art direction. Or you may have to work hand in hand with the person designing the location. Because let's say, because as a designer, you could decide to make all the decisions, the art direction decisions when it comes to the characters. But what if the person doing the location makes decisions that goes against what you decided? That is where the art director would be very important. It would make sure that all the departments are working hand in hand. And in the absence of an actual art director, then the lead designer, the lead character designer, and the lead location designers, and then they will have to themselves work hand in hand to make sure that whatever they're doing doesn't work against what the other guy is doing. So yes, it would be much better if they had an art director, but it's not the end of the world if they don't have one just yet. So in an ideal world, they would hire a new producer. The new producer would hire a creative director that he trusts. The creative director would hire an art director that he trusts, and the art director would hire a lead designer that he trusts. Sadly, this is not an ideal world, and sadly, sometimes things go wrong. It happens. So, is it the end of the world if there's not a creative director or an art director for DC Universe Online? No. But it would be better if they had a creative director. Obviously, it would be better if they had an art director. It would be better if they were able to fill all the positions that are currently empty. But it does not mean that there's no leadership either. It just means that other people on the team are gonna have to step up, roll their sleeves, and maybe do take care of a few responsibilities that normally would not be their responsibilities. And obviously, it will mean that the people at the top, the people at EG7, they will have to take a more active role in managing Daybreak and DC Universe Online than they normally would. But at the end of the day, the people at EG7 are already making the decisions. The people at EG7 are already the true leaders when it comes to Daybreak and when it comes to DC Universe Online. So it mostly means that right now we don't have the illusion that the decisions come from the creative director or from the DC Universe Online producer. We can clearly see that right now the decisions come straight from EG7. So right now we don't have the illusions that the decisions come from the DCUO producer or the DCUO creative director. We have the real reality that the decisions actually come from EG7. So despite some positions still needing to be filled, the true leaders are still there. The people at EG7 are still there, and they are the true leaders when it comes to Daybreak and when it comes to DC Universe Online.